Okay.
If you can, please.
Sorry, did you? I said I didn't. I don't know that it's interesting facts to get without maybe with questioning, but it wouldn't necessarily steer my interview or course of direction.
Okay. So in this PowerPoint presentation, and I'll represent to you later on, Commander Miner talked about this concept that the words directly offended actually meant something to me. Did you see that in the PowerPoint?
I saw that in PowerPoint.
Okay. And one of the things that I think you described about Commander Miner's personality is that he can be, I don't know what,
Abrasive.
Abrasive? Can he be like hyper-technical?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, that's stuck on a point.
Stuck on a point, is that what you said?
Yes.
So is it plausible, after reading that PowerPoint, that he believed that directly offended had a 2-point meaning?
By what he has written. That's his interpretation. I would say that's probably his interpretation.
And is that consistent with what you know about him for 20 years of working with him at the Scottsdale Police Department, that he might get stuck on a point and have a strong interpretation?
Yes.
Now, you didn't focus in on that directly offended, or the directly part of the directly offended statement when you did your review, right?
No.
So you didn't focus in on that much detail?
No.
Do you agree with me that the word directly modifies the concept of offended?
You're offended, you're offended. Or indirectly, directly, indirectly, doesn't have context. You're offended, that's just, I think you made the point to me, was inherent, the comment itself wasn't inherently.
Okay. Sergeant Lewis wasn't as clear as he could have been in his question, right?
I think he was doing a broad scope at that point in time. I don't think he had context during that first interview. As I said, I thought Aaron was the first one interviewed, and it was done in a matter of fact, quick time frame.
Now, help me out with this. Chief Slavin had context during that first interview, though, right?
I don't know.
Well, Chief Slavin was,
He made the comment.
he made the comment, number one. He was provided the complaint from the union, right?
I don't know. That I don't know.
Yeah, I can represent to you, and I think you can tell us that per the NOI, they have to provide a copy of the complaint, right?
The NOI should have enough specifics about who the complainant is and what the specific complaint is.
And Chief Slavin at that point absolutely knew that Commander Miner and Lieutenant Bonnet had previously expressed concerns about this, right?
Project Foundation.
Well, you were in a meeting.
Please answer the question.
Would it have been inappropriate for Chief Slavin to say to IA, hey, just so you know, I know you're looking into who's offended. I know that Bonnet and Miner are offended. They expressed offense way early. Could he have told them that at IA?
If asked, I think when asked and answered.
Okay. Is there any difference in the standards expected of somebody under investigation versus a witness, or do they both have the same obligation to be honest and truthful in their answers per Scottsdale's policies?
The NOI for both state that internal affairs are expected to be truthful.
The standards are the same for both witnesses and targets, correct?
Correct.
Policy makes no distinction. And you've never received a training that said there was any distinction, right?
No.
Okay. So eventually, or going way, way, way back, the email that was sent by Slavin to the meeting attendees, does that qualify as an AR 333 report of misconduct to a supervisor?
Like I said, I don't know that I've ever really seen that email,
Okay.
so I don't know what the context of the whole email was.
Okay. How many of the meeting attendees report directly to you?
At that time, I was uniformed services, so 7 or 8.
7 or 8 of them?
Six commanders, maybe the trainers.
And besides Commander Miner and Lieutenant Bonnet, none of the other meeting attendees reported Slavin's misconduct to you, correct?
Correct.
And I guess I'll expand that one question more broad. You're unaware of any other Scottsdale Police Department employee other than Commander Minor and Lieutenant Bonnet, and then I guess Damian Mendoza, who reported Slavin's misconduct even through their chain of command, right?
The talk to me, actually, the talk to me was Aaron.
Okay.
Went forward.
And was it appropriate for Commander Minor to bring forward a complaint to you if he believed that there was conduct that violated AR 333?
Yes.
And does Chief Slavin's statement, in your opinion, violate AR 333?
Again, I don't know what the exact conversation was other than Charlie Hebdo and the Tommy game. As I said, I think a lot of comments get made and not all point investigated.
Knowing everything that you know, weighing a totality of the circumstances in this case, do you think Commander Minor deserves to lose his career?
When I brought it forward to Chief Rockwell, that was certainly in the back of your mind. If you look at the statement and knowing the gravity of the statement, knowing that in our agency, if you lie, you don't continue to work there.
And your recommendation was do not proceed, right?
My recommendation was, I don't know if that was my exact words, but it certainly was the Chief Rockwell had a conversation with legal and HR before you go forward.
Help me out with that. So legal and HR might not have known the context that you knew, right?
I don't know how they would not know the context. I know because most of I didn't read the entire investigations.
At what point were legal and HR informed that Commander Minor and Lieutenant Bonnet had brought forward these exact concerns to you the day of and the day after the meeting?
Hold on. Please don't answer that question. I object on the grounds that if he's asking for what information was shared with legal, that is requesting attorney-client privilege, and he should not answer. But as to HR, please go ahead.
I agree.
Again, I wouldn't know because my conversation was only with Chief Rockwell.
If this board were to find that there was confusion or a lack of intent to deliberately deceive IA, do you think that, would you welcome Commander Minor back to the Scottsdale Police Department? And would you trust him in his decision-making? Would you hope that next time he was asked more clear questions if he's ever before IA?
I would hope he would provide more clear questions or more clear answers.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Ms. Denny?
I have some. I'll try to be quick. If you were the big chief, you would not have gone forward based on your review of the transcripts. Fair?
Well, as I said, I would consult legal and HR before I move forward.
Okay. Do you believe on any level that it was inappropriate for Chief Rodwell to order an investigation into Commander Minor?
If you have questions, both integrity, that's his option for the
And Chief Rodwell chose to go forward with the CP. Are you criticizing him for that decision? Okay. Wouldn't have been yours, but you don't criticize his decision, do you?
I can't say it would have been mine because I didn't have the conversation with legal and HR.
Okay.
I don't know what information he received, but obviously whatever his conversation was appropriate to move forward.
Okay. So for you, it was a question mark of whether to go forward, and you do not criticize Chief Rodwell's decision.
Correct.
You don't know whether HR was told about the information that Commander Minor brought to you. Is that right?
Correct.
Mr. Serbalik asked you if it would have been good for the investigators to know that information, or words to that effect. And you never talked to anybody in the internal affairs investigation, did you?
No.
In the first one?
Correct.
Okay. And it probably would have been good for the internal affairs investigators to know that they should talk to you in the first investigation, wouldn't it have been?
I think so.
Particularly as the information that the investigators didn't know was not just people's subjective feelings, but was that from a supervisory perspective, a subordinate, Lieutenant Bonnet, had gone to Commander Minor as his supervisor to raise a complaint. That is significant to you, is it not?
Yes.
And a complete providing of information to internal affairs would have included that. Do you agree? And you're aware that the obligation is truthful and complete under the general orders? Okay. Providing complete information to IA on Commander Minor's part would have, in your opinion, included the fact that Lieutenant Bonnet had come to him as his supervisor. Do you agree?
Yes.
Did you review the transcript of Commander Minor's interview during his IA, his second interview overall? You reviewed the first one and you called it odd.
Yes.
You're not the only person that said that we've heard from. Sergeant Goldhart and Sergeant Lewis also called it, I think, weird. You said it didn't flow right. I imagine you get a sense of flow in your position reviewing many, many transcripts over the years. And you were asked if there were odd questions. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Were there odd answers as well?
Yes.
And I forget which one of the investigators told us that it was strange to him that the only time he had ever encountered a witness or potential victim that was so reticent and so closed off was in a domestic violence case. That there's, and I will characterize that kind of halting, kind of drawing information out. Do you have any comment on that with respect to your review of Commander Minor's transcript?
I think it was a big deal. It was a big deal to bring this forward. It was a big deal to have it investigated. So I don't know if that was the reticent part. There was a lot of things going on at the time.
It's a big deal if an officer has any integrity violation, no matter how small the lie.
We know at SOPD, you have to sustain integrity violations, you're no longer going there.
Even if the lie is a white lie.
Right.
Are Aaron and Bob friends?
Yes.
Good friends?
Say, pretty good friends.
As far as you know with their working relationship, are Aaron and Bob probably closer to each other than Aaron is to anyone else that you know on the force?
Probably.
Okay. Best friends?
But they're very good friends. Like I said, they were on the first one I had since I came on. I don't know if they went to the cafe together or not. Since that first one.
They talk all the time. Aaron told you that Bob was, did Aaron tell you that Bob was pretty emotional about the whole thing after the comments came out?
Yes.
Did Aaron tell you anybody else was emotional?
We only had a conversation with me and Bob.
Did Aaron tell you about anyone else being offended other than Bob?
I think our main conversation was with me and Bob.
Did Aaron tell you anyone else was personally offended by what Chief Slavin said because they had some family member or a member of a protected class?
I don't think anything other than me and Bob.
The only person Aaron ever talked to you about was Bob,
I think so.
and he shared that Bob was very upset about this.
Yes.
Bob was his direct report.
Yes.
Did Aaron have any other direct reports in that meeting? That you know
Oh,
of?
yes. Well, I know his direct reports, I don't recall whether, since I was not at the meeting, I don't know who was on there.
Fair enough. Did any of his other direct reports make appeals to Commander Minor that he brought to your attention for assistance or reporting for the Slavin comments? Aaron told you that Bob texted him during the meeting, words to the effect of, "What the F," when he heard those comments. You knew about that? You knew that Bob made notes during the meeting? Did Aaron tell you anybody else texted him during the meeting? Did Aaron tell you anybody else made notes? Did Aaron tell you anybody else called him in the car and talked to him on the way home from the meeting?
Conversation.
Okay. So pretty much as far as everything you heard from Aaron, who you spoke with all the time, who you were close with, who you had a working friendship with for 22 years, the person that stuck out to in the conversations, it sounds like it was Bob.
Yes.
Bob was the primary aggrieved person as far as you knew.
Yes.
Okay. And we can argue about whether IA asked a bad question about directly offended, but if IA had just asked Aaron, do you know anybody who was offended? The answer should have been Bob, right? Okay. The answer should not have been, nobody sticks out. Agreed?
Objection,
That
that
would be allowed,
misstates
but
the
not-
record.
It's a hypothetical. The record will speak for itself.
Move along, please.
That's all I got.
The Vice Chair Smith.
Yes, thank you. If I recall correctly from the transcripts I've read, and I've read, and I've read, and I've read, at the time of this meeting on the infamous May 8th, you were down at your son's graduation from the University of Arizona?
Yes.
Is he off the payroll?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Well, kind of. Not fully.
So while you were gone, you talked to ex-Commander Minor a couple of times on the phone. When you're back early that next week, he's meeting with you face to face and for, I think, the third time saying, something happened, this is what happened, and it's not good.
Yes.
We've got people offended, upset, whatever words he used. When you went to the chief with that information, and the chief basically said, either I'm handling it or I've handled it. You didn't press the point, from what I'm understanding, that, chief, maybe this is a bigger deal and we should get other people involved. Is that a fair understanding?
That's a fair statement.
Is there any regret on your part that you didn't push this?
I have faith that I bring something forward to the chief that with years of experience that we would handle it in an appropriate manner.
Okay. The Slavin 08 investigation was closed on July 12th. And then the minor 085 investigation opens up on October 1st. Pretty significant gap of time.
Yes.
What happened in that period of time that would have spurred the records request from Assistant Chief Slavin and you getting involved in requesting documents and BOD?
I think there was, once this was done, in that time period is when I believe I looked into the alleged AR violations by Commander Minor. And really, there was conversations of, it was done with Chief Slavin, all this stuff was done, and we were looking at things moving forward. I think the only conversations I had in that time period was about how I was gonna handle Commander Minor moving forward and some performance things that came out of this.
Okay. I'm assuming just by what I'm understanding of behaviors and practices, that the records request by Slavin and by you happened pretty close to the October 1st?
I actually think they were months apart. I don't know the
Oh,
time.
really?
I think it was quite a period of time that went by between Slavin asking me to look at that, and the only person I had the conversation with about what my opinion was with Chief Rodwell. And there was a period of time that I assumed he got advice or whatever. We didn't know that there was anything going on. And actually, when he brought us into the office to inform us there was a new CP, the three assistant chiefs were pretty surprised. There was no conversation about another CP or anything between any of us.
So let me ask to make sure I am understanding what I'd like to understand. After the Slavin matter was closed on July 12th, did Rich Slavin go after the records pretty quickly so he could understand what was happening and what had been said?
What happened, I don't know the exact time frame. I don't know if he did a public records request.
He
I don't know
did?
how, so I didn't know that. So I don't know when all that occurred. And I honestly don't know the timeline between when they asked me to look at the first CD and all that, so it's hard for me to say.
At the time that there's obviously a concern and an investigation opens up, my understanding is that Minor meets with Rod Bell. Minor meets with you 2 or 3 times. Minor is interviewed again by IA. And he has multiple opportunities to, if you will, correct himself from the interview on 6/28. And it doesn't appear that he ever really did.
I know that I met with Aaron after he was given an NOI form, the second CP, and I think the chief actually gave him a document highlighted with the question, with the line in question. And I think that's one of our meetings at Starbucks to say, this is the only thing you have to put on this one statement, that's it.
You know him well. Why the obstinance?
I think Aaron just has a different perspective of how he goes about things.
Even after coaching from a friend and supervisor that he's known a long time, he doesn't take the bait.
He said it was a brief conversation of laid out, I know this is the one thing you have to clarify, and it was probably a conversation of what's the gravity of all of it.
Just one more, I think. When someone, like a direct report, comes to you as he did, after the 5/8 meeting, a couple of phone calls in the meeting and says, there's an issue here.
Yep.
Do you keep your own personal file of occasions like that? Do you note things down?
I don't know that I document those because I took the information right away to that was almost immediate meeting with the chief to discuss the whole event.
Thank you very much.
Just a couple of questions. You said that you make inappropriate comments during the day.
Sure I have.
Are you referring to inappropriate comments in general sense or inappropriate comments that would otherwise, that would be such that they relate to some sexual, racial, talking about disability, that nature that would otherwise, I don't know if you know, the part 1 section of AR 333. Or AR 333.
I would characterize my comments as have a multiple sailor. I routinely probably drop the F-bomb as a course of conversation that I'm sure violate that AR.
Well, there's 2 parts to that. We've heard there's somewhat of a difference between part 1 and part 2.
Correct.
When you're saying you may violate that AR, are you talking about the second part, the unprofessional conduct? Or are you talking about the first part that would be sexual, it would be discrimination as a matter of law?
No, it's not discrimination.
Okay, so, so would you distinguish between what you just said you do and someone making an inappropriate comment that could be a violation of protocol towards another officer or employee?
I think what I do is different.
If you look at volume 1 of those 3 volumes to refer to, you have volume 1?
Yes, sir.
We go about, let's see here, about 90% of the back. I'm asking you to go to page 2786. Way towards the back. Oh, you were looking at the top, oh, the number's
Yes,
not
I'm sorry,
quite.
2786.
2786. You on that page?
My interview with, Henry Popp.
Okay, that, yes, the record is the interview with Scott Popp, Larry Cronin on January 31, 2020. This is case number, Bill, that's your interview that you had with Attorney Cronin's investigation. I want you to focus on lines 160 to 167, if you could just read that to yourself. Just tell me when you finish reading. So, go to line, I guess it'd be 164, it begins making comments. If you read that line through to the end of the sentence at line 166.
Making comments about us bringing this forward, even though I think the statement's inherently offensive, and didn't feel Rich felt like the statement was offensive at all.
Okay, so do I understand that, what you were saying there, that you felt that Assistant Chief Slavin didn't feel the comments were offensive?
I said, I think this, in this context, was people didn't feel that it was taken serious enough, that Rich, that the statement was inherently offensive.
Well, what I'm asking is, did Assistant Chief Slavin think that the statement he made, or statements he made, were inherently offensive? Okay, so he was expressing that. And did you understand when you made this statement to Attorney Cronin that he was referring to the statement to Lieutenant Myers, the one you gave?
I don't know that that's,
So he could have been referring to that, or he could have been referring to the comment about the Gay Magazine newspaper.
yes.
And then the next sentence, yeah, it's very short, it says, so that was the kind of the rub, back and forth. What was the rub that you were talking about?
I think up here that Karen and Bob thought it was inherently offensive. The comment itself wasn't inherently offensive. The feeling was that it was, Rich didn't think it was offensive.
Okay. Now, the City of Scottsdale Police Department provides all its employees implicit bias training, is that correct?
Yes.
And that was conducted really sometime between November 2017 and May of 2019. Was there such training?
I believe the command staff had gone through it, or higher level staff, I don't know if that's what town hall was like.
Do you think the Assistant Chief Slavin attended that training?
Yes.
That's on implicit bias.
I believe so.
And there's also sexual harassment training and refresher sexual harassment training. Is that correct?
I think so.
Well, there was a retreat in November 2017, and that was one of the things that was required, that was being established for training and refresher training going forward. I think even, it looks like it was for a year or two, so at least by 2018, in 2019, there should have been training in sexual harassment.
I don't recall the sexual harassment training. I remember we focused on implicit bias moving forward.
So you don't recall if you took sexual harassment training?
I don't believe.
Do you recall any sexual harassment training you were taking? Even if it's discussed in the first one?
Yes, I've taken it.
When was the last time you took it?
Honestly, I can't remember the last time. I don't know if it's, I don't believe it's one of the ones that we do online. I don't believe we do ethics training every year online. I don't recall the sexual harassment training last time.
Does it call if it was online or in person?
I remember when I was first promoted to supervisor, I took a sexual harassment training class
In person or online?
in person.
And when was that? When were you?
1998.
The implicit bias training, do you recall when you took that? You can give me the year.
17, 18-ish, 2017, 2018.
Was that
first.
We have nothing further. Just a comment, so we'll finish this. Any follow-up from any questions
I do.
Vice Chairman asked?
Thank you. Chief Popp, you were just asking some questions about implicit bias training. In the termination notice for Commander Minor, there is some mention generally about Aaron dropping the ball on setting some things up and doing some of his performance goals. Are you familiar with that situation?
Yes.
What was Aaron supposed to set up?
It's the implicit bias, and who was in charge of, was what, on juvenile justice.
So Commander Minor was actually in charge of setting up implicit bias training for the department as one of his performance goals in his last year with the department. Okay. And there was criticism of Commander Minor for not achieving any forward motion on that goal. Is that correct?
I think our conversation was it directly affected the chief's training, because the chief had goals and projects that Aaron was in charge of.
Okay. You are familiar with that because you're Aaron's supervisor and you're a direct report of Chief Rodwell, is that correct?
Right.
So you're intimately familiar with the department's setting up and goal setting on the implicit bias training?
Yes.
Okay. In your opinion, was setting up implicit bias training a priority for the department?
Yes, chief's goal.
I have no further questions, thank you.
Mr. Smolik, follow-up?
Chief, have you ever remembered something after an interview tape was turned off and then asked to turn it back on, either as a witness or as an interviewer?
Yes.
Okay. Some information that's come in is that after the interview, Commander Minor told Sergeant Lewis that there was information about a report or reporting and how Chief Rodwell handled the investigation, and Commander Minor offered to Sergeant Lewis to go back on tape, and then Sergeant Lewis declined to go back on tape. Were you familiar with that at all? If that occurred, should Sergeant Lewis have gone back on tape to see what Commander Minor wanted to say?
I don't know why we wouldn't.
No, as an investigator in internal affairs, you would have gone back on tape to say, hey, if you have something else pertinent, go ahead and tell
Our
me.
goal is to try to get the most complete information.
Okay. And then you were just asking questions related to Commander Minor and performance issues. I just want to make sure the board's clear. There was nothing that you were aware of related to Commander Minor's performance that would have risen to the level of a suspension or demotion or termination, correct? That's an accurate statement? Okay. And you were asked questions by the vice chair about these conversations that you had and the multiple opportunities that Commander Minor had to correct himself on the 628 interview. And I want to follow up specifically about the conversations that you had with Commander Minor. Commander Minor adamantly denied lying or intentionally misleading the investigators when he talked to you, correct?
Yes.
And he explained to you that he told the truth and he answered the questions to the best of his understanding and ability at the time, right?
I don't know that it was phrased like that, but
I'd kill for a recorder, we don't have one, but that's the general sentiment that he expressed to you?
yes.
And he expressed indignation and outrage and felt like it was retaliation by Chief Slavin for him being placed under this investigation, correct?
I don't know that it was a conversation about Chief Slavin. I think he had, that he felt he had lied.
Right.
And to me, it was clear that I laid out, here's the one sentence you have to answer.
Right.
And we even had a conversation, he told me that you and Bob talked, I relayed that information, so I think that was the conversation.
Right. And let's say that Commander Minor had given you, in response to this, he could just snap his fingers, and given you that PowerPoint that you reviewed during that break. Would that have provided you with an explanation as to why he answered the question the way he did based off of why he understood the statement?
I think the PowerPoint's pretty long.
Right.
It was really short because it was just a statement, like you didn't answer.
Okay. And the statement was, why did you answer this directly offended question the way you did, right? And Commander Minor said, I understood directly offended to mean two parts. It was directed at somebody, and I thought they were offended, right?
It's according to the statement, yes.
Sitting here today, do you believe that Commander Minor lied about his belief as to the answer to that question?
I don't think he intentionally lied. I'm just trying to figure out what his statement is. As I said, he's focused and that's what it was.
Right. And for an investigation conduct, the first time, or the correct time for him to go on the record is after he's been given an NOI and said, this is the reason here. And he chose to do that, right?
I don't know when, on the first interview, it was in a while, I don't know that sequence. But obviously that's a part of the formal interview by IA, from my perspective.
Right.
So the expectation is to give the information then and there.
Right.
And I think he had an opportunity to clarify his statement. As I said, PowerPoint is very long for what was really just a statement. And talk about and I talk. No one to us.
Right. Help me out with that though, because Commander Minor's opportunity to correct himself happened when he was told you're going to be investigated for an integrity issue, right?
And so,
So if Commander Minor had told you, hey, this is my explanation, you would have said, hey, give your explanation to the appropriate person, right?
we had no conversation with the IA interview.
Right. You didn't ask him to explain himself, did you?
No.
In fact, you told him, hey, heads up, you're going to need to explain yourself, and this might end up as an IA investigation, paraphrased, right?
Yes.
And you basically were trying to tell him, you better have a good reason, because you're going to be looked at.
Yes.
And he prepared a PowerPoint that you just saw for the first time today to explain that reason, right?
Yes.
And you have no reason to believe that explanation, knowing everything you know and your characterization of him, that he was trying to lie in that PowerPoint. Thanks.
Stay, you get the final word.
Chief Popp, you were asked a lot of questions about a lot of things that were brand new to you that you never reviewed before. Certainly, we all have different interpretations of the evidence. You're not privy to it. That's why you have an investigation, so that someone can take a look and review it all. Do you have any problem knowing what you know about the investigators, about Commander Minor, about the department, deferring to the judgment of the investigators that actually took the time, sat down, investigated, and looked into this?
No reason to not trust them.
So as you sit here right now, you would not disapprove of the conclusion that Sergeant Lewis and Sergeant Goldhart came to in their full investigation that Commander Minor did in fact lie?
Objection, last foundation. He doesn't know the full investigation.
Interesting.
You don't disagree with their finding that he lied?
I have no reason to right now.
I'm thinking of a question, but I don't think it's directed to the witness. Hey, normally when I ask this, when they answer affirmatively, may this witness be released Ms. Day?
Yes, thank you.
Mrs. Sabala?
Yes.
Lieutenant, I want to thank you very much for coming.
He's a chief, sir.
Excuse me?
He's a chief.
Oh, you're a chief now?
Don't demote him.
I heard someone say chief when you walked in, I thought I misheard, I apologize, congratulations. I don't know, did you hear my admonition yesterday morning about witnesses not speaking with them anymore?
I was told that we had hoped to go.
Okay, well, it's important here because what's going on here is being transmitted elsewhere. So just to be on the safe side, so someone doesn't come to you, not witness, and ask you, or you tell them what happened, you tell them, and then they go tell a witness. I just ask that you not speak about this matter until sometime after Tuesday afternoon, preferably after 5 o'clock. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Council, we need to discuss anything further?
No, we will send you our stipulation related to the witnesses for tomorrow and the breakdown that we anticipate.
Okay, just preliminarily, we expect to do, okay, Chief Rundle, Bill tomorrow morning,
Yes,
and then Assistant Chief Slavin tomorrow afternoon. Is that
Yes.
correct? And no one else will do the rest of Tuesday.
yes.